Aerodynamics is a well-known name in the coaster industry that you've probably heard a lot. They are known as one of the most revolutionary companies of all time, creating the Mine Train, the Good Suspended Coaster, the Hypercoaster, and arguably most importantly, the modern inverting coaster. The modern, safe inverting coaster began its reign at Knott's Berry Farm with Corkscrew. This is a now pretty generic corkscrew layout, but at the time it was a revolutionary ride. Aero would go on to make a ton of corkscrews for parks all over. One of these parks was Worlds of Fun, a small Cedar Fair park in Kansas City, Missouri. They would get their Aero corkscrew in 1976, just a year after the original opened. It would be called Scream Roller, and no doubt it was a must-ride for the guests visiting Worlds of Fun. With its two corkscrews right over the midway, it was absolute eye candy for anyone walking around. Upon the opening of Scream Roller, the park saw a 10% jump in attendance, from 1.06 million to 1.16 million. However, when more and more of these corkscrew coasters were built, they eventually lost some novelty. When you can go to so many other parks and ride the exact same thing, the ride just becomes a bit less special. Not only that, but 4 years after Scream Roller's debut, a very similar ride opened across the park. Orient Express beat Scream Roller in pretty much every way, leaving little reason to ride Scream Roller. Worlds of Fun didn't like that, even though they built the competition. Whatever. They wanted to maintain the original popularity of Scream Roller, and what better way to do that than change up the whole ride experience? The park partnered with Aero, at that time called Aero Hus, to make a brand new train style, and therefore a brand new experience. The trains that Worlds of Fun would request were of the stand-up variety. This was after the first two stand-up coasters were made in Japan with a similar method. Japanese manufacturer Togo built two sit-down coasters, and in 1982, both of them had new trains added. If you don't know what a stand-up coaster is, or you've just never ridden one, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. I cannot say if the Aero or Togo trains are comfortable or not, but knowing how comfortable Aero's normal sit-down looper trains are, I'm going to guess the stand-up trains were pretty awkward. Once Scream Roller had its new toy added, it opened back up to the public in 1983, now as Extreme Roller, or EXT for short. I actually cannot find a single review of the ride as a stand-up on the internet, so I'm just going to take a wild guess based on most people's views on stand-ups, with a little bit of "I'll talk about that in a bit" mixed in. Very uncomfortable ride experience with a fair bit of headbanging and other area crushing. Aside from just the normal pains of stand-up coasters though, there was a much bigger issue. When you change the trains in such a big way but don't reprofile the track at all, the track is just not made for stand-up trains. The stand-up trains were much heavier than the original trains that the ride was intended to have, leading to the lift hills chain, and probably the whole ride, having a ton of unnecessary stress put on it. Tacking onto that is a lack of heartlining. If you don't know what heartlining is, I have a whole video about it on my channel that will be in the top right corner if I decide not to be lazy. A quick summary is that you want the track to rotate around your heart instead of your head, as it keeps the ride much more comfortable. Your center of gravity and placement of your heart though is much different standing up than sitting down. This no doubt led to some jarring and painful elements, all of which resulted in EXT quickly reverting back to its original form in 1984. But EXT wasn't the only Aero stand-up, and it wasn't even the biggest fail. On the other side of Missouri, Six Flags Over Mid-America, now Six Flags St. Louis, had a set of dueling Aero mine trains. This pair of mine trains was known as River King Runaway Mine Train, and featured a pretty standard layout with a drop at the end. This concept alone just wasn't enough for Six Flags though. Following the failure of stand-up trains on EXT, one side of River King would be retrofitted with Aero's now tested, and I'm not really sure you could say proven, stand-up trains. I'm really not sure whose idea it was in the first place to put stand-up trains on a very chill mine train, but I guess nobody stopped them, so here we are. Once the trains were ready to go, Railblazer reopened to the public in 1984. It ran as it should for less than a month before disaster struck. On July 7th of the same year that the ride opened, a woman was thrown out of her restraint and to her death.
In St. Louis, Missouri, the Railblazer stand-up roller coaster has not rolled 1 inch since Stella Holcomb lost her life while riding it Sunday night.
As we made this sharp whip, she was gone, just like that.
We have a locked shoulder harness, a locked knee brace, and the third safety belt that's also locked on top of it. So, again, from a theoretical standpoint, that shouldn't occur.
She was riding with her husband in the back row when the incident occurred, and was quickly taken to a nearby hospital where she was pronounced dead. The park stated that the woman may have fainted or been suffering from some other illness, because despite her falling out, all restraints were locked into position when the train returned to the queue house. Despite this, her husband still reported that his wife had never fainted. She was simply thrown out of the ride on a sharp turn. There's really no way to confirm which side of the story is the correct one, but regardless of that, this death was devastating in many regards. Not only was it terrible for the woman's family and the park, but it did not look good on Arrow's side either. Arrow had really been struggling lately, first with the Bat at Kings Island completely flopping, then with EXT at Worlds of Fun failing entirely, and now with a death on one of their coasters at Six Flags Over Mid-America. After an accident of such magnitude, Arrow made the smart decision to be done with stand-up coasters. They did manage to recover even with all their failures though, and so did the stand-up coaster. Arrow went on to make a ton of loopers and even the world's tallest coaster, Magnum XL 200, in 1989. The stand-up model would be revived most notably by B&M, but also from a bit of work by Togo and Intamin. These manufacturers did much better with the concept than Arrow ever did, and B&M may even be offering a brand new kind of stand-up soon, although that's still unknown. I think a big reason why later stand-up coasters worked out is because the trains were actually meant for the track that they were on. What's funny though is that retrofitting stand-up coasters still happens, but now in reverse. As stand-ups have slowly lost their touch with the public and enthusiasts due to their discomfort, a few B&Ms have changed into floorless coasters. This raises the question of are stand-up coasters dead? But that's for another time. In conclusion, don't try to stick your brand new trains on coasters they weren't designed for, especially if the coasters already have questionable track profiling. As far as this video goes, it's about as over as Arrow after they built X2. Would you have ridden an Arrow stand-up if given the chance? Especially EXT because, yikes. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe as it helps me out and raises my self-esteem. Comment any video ideas you may have for me, and I will see you next time.